Okay, so get this. You know how sometimes you just make a choice, right? Like, a split-second thing, and then boom, your whole life just goes sideways? Yeah, that was pretty much me, about, oh, I don't know, 2 years ago now? Maybe a little more. My name's Jessica, I'm 31, and if you had told me back then that I'd be sitting here, spilling all this, I'd have laughed in your face. Or probably just rolled my eyes and gone back to scrolling on my phone. It all started with Ben. My Ben. Or, well, my ex-Ben now, obviously. He was fine. He was always just fine. Not exciting, not terrible, just steady. Like a really boring heartbeat. And honestly, for a while, that was exactly what I thought I wanted. Stability, you know? After all the craziness before him, I just wanted someone who wasn't going to surprise me with a tattoo of my name on there or suddenly decide to move to Fiji to become a coconut farmer. Ben was a data analyst or something. It sounded important, but mostly it meant he sat in front of a computer all day and came home tired. He made decent money, though, which was a plus. Always paid his share, sometimes more, without me even having to bat my eyelashes. He was one of those too nice guys, always trying to avoid conflict, a real people pleaser. He'd agree to anything just to keep the peace. I probably should have seen this coming, honestly. The signs were there. We lived in a decent apartment in Dallas. Nothing fancy, but it had a balcony that looked over a bunch of other boring balconies, and it was close enough to my job that my commute wasn't a nightmare. My job, by the way, is, well, I work at an office. I do stuff. It's fine. My boss is a real piece of work sometimes, always on my case about little things, but whatever. Ben always picked up the slack with the bills, you know? Like, he'd just cover the rent, and then I'd chip in for groceries or utilities when I felt like it. It was always understood that his money was our money, and my money was my money. Smart, right? Why tie up my cash when he's just sitting on a pile of it? So, this whole mess, it started with something so stupid. A lie. A little white lie that just snowballed into a whole avalanche of crap. Ben had this friend, Sarah. She was one of those women who just radiated holier than thou. Always smiling, always asking if everything was okay with me, like she knew something I didn't. Bitch. I hated her. She always dressed like she was going to a brunch with royalty, even if she was just meeting Ben for coffee. And Ben? Oh, he was so blind to it. She's just a friend, Jess, he'd say, all innocent like. Yeah, a friend who always had some crisis that needed his immediate attention. One night, Ben was out with Sarah. Again. I swear, he spent more time with her than he did with me. And I knew, deep down, he wasn't doing anything. Ben was too much of a Boy Scout for that. But it still irked me. I was bored. And maybe a little tipsy. I was scrolling through Facebook, seeing everyone else's perfect lives, and I just felt this surge of annoyance. Like, why was my life so boring while everyone else was off on exotic vacations or getting engaged? So, I did something dumb. I posted something vague, something like, feeling really let down tonight. Some people just don't know what loyalty means. Hashtag cryptic, hashtag drama. I knew Ben would see it. And he did. He called me, all concerned. Jess, what's wrong? Are you okay? And I just mumbled something about him being out all the time, about feeling neglected. I didn't even have a specific reason, but I knew he'd feel guilty. He always did. He was so over-accommodating, always trying to make me happy. It was exhausting, frankly, having to constantly come up with new ways to make him feel bad so he'd try harder. The next day, things got weird. Ben was supposed to meet me for lunch, but he never showed up. His phone went straight to voicemail. I called his work, and they said he hadn't come in. My heart did this weird little flutter, but not like panic, more like intrigue. Like, finally, something interesting was happening. I tried calling his mom, his sister, anyone. No one had heard from him. Then the police called. They found his car ditched on the side of the road, like, way out in the sticks. And inside they found a small, fancy jewelry box. Empty. And a note. A handwritten note, super messy, something about how he messed up and needed to leave. My brain just went into overdrive. This was perfect. My mind just started spinning. I remember thinking, oh, this is good. This is really good. I'd been complaining about him not being around enough, about him ditching me. Now he was gone. But not just gone, like, gone in a way that made him look like the bad guy. Like he'd taken off, leaving me high and dry. I could play the victim. I could be the heartbroken wife. And I loved being the center of attention. When the cops came to my apartment, I turned on the waterworks. Full on sobbing. Talking about how he'd been so distant lately, how I suspected he was keeping secrets, how he'd been acting shady. I even brought up Sarah, spinning it like he was having an affair and that's why he ran. I knew, deep down, none of it was true. Ben was too much of a goody two-shoes for that. But it sounded believable, especially with the cryptic Facebook post still lurking out there. They bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into a month. And then, they found him. Not really found him, more like, he turned himself in. Apparently, he'd been picked up by some random guy who thought he was a hitchhiker, and he just kept driving, like, across state lines. He said he panicked. He said he just wanted to get away from everything, from the constant arguments, from the feeling that he could never do anything right. And he said he'd found the jewelry box in his car, and for some reason, he just took it. Like, he didn't know why, it was just there, and he panicked. The cops found out the jewelry box belonged to this really old, really rich lady in his neighborhood who had been robbed a few days before Ben went missing. A break-in. And they had a witness, some busybody neighbor who saw a guy looking suspicious near the old lady's house around the time of the robbery. The witness description? It fit Ben. A little. Enough. Ben swore he was innocent. He swore he just found the box in his car and panicked. He said he was just trying to get away from me, from the pressure. He said he didn't rob anyone. He just ran. And when he turned himself in, he fully expected to clear his name. He was so naive, that guy. Always thinking everyone would believe him because he was honest. I remember the first time I went to see him in jail. He looked terrible. His hair was all messed up, his eyes were bloodshot. He kept saying, "Jess, you know I wouldn't do this. You know I'm not a thief." And I just looked at him, and for a second, a tiny second, I almost felt bad. But then I remembered all the times he'd made me feel like I was crazy for being upset, all the times he'd invalidate my feelings by saying you're being dramatic or it's not that serious. And I remembered all the times he'd questioned my friendships, all the times he'd acted like I needed to be accountable for every second of my day, while he was off doing whatever with Sarah. This was my chance. My leverage. So I looked him right in the eye, and I said, "Ben, I want to believe you. I really do. But, you did run. And that box, it was in your car. What am I supposed to think?" He just looked defeated. And that's when I knew. This was it. The trial was a blur of boring legal talk. I played the grieving, confused wife perfectly. I testified, of course. I talked about how Ben had been stressed and distant lately. How he'd been irritable. I even mentioned how he'd sometimes forget things and how I was worried about his mental state. I didn't outright say he was guilty, but I didn't say he was innocent either. I just painted a picture of a guy who was unraveling, a guy who could have done something impulsive. A total gaslighting expert, I was. I made him question his own perceptions, his own memory. The prosecution ate it up. They had the witness, the box, his flight, and my testimony, which basically sealed the deal. His lawyer tried to say he was just under stress, that he panicked. But it sounded weak. Like, who just finds a stolen jewelry box in their car and then takes off for another state? It just didn't make sense. Not unless you were guilty. He got 5 years. 5 years. I know. It sounds like a lot for just running, but with the robbery tacked on, and his flight from justice, that's what they gave him. When the judge read out the sentence, Ben looked at me, and his eyes, they were just empty. Like all the light had gone out. And honestly, I felt a little victorious. It sounds awful, I know, but I did. I was finally free. No more trying to impress him, no more feeling like I wasn't enough. No more passive-aggressive comments disguised as jokes. I was finally off the hook. I started dating again pretty quickly. Not serious, just casual. I mean, I was still technically married, but he was in jail, so what was he gonna do? My friends, bless their hearts, they were all so supportive. Poor Jess, they'd say. Going through so much. They still thought he was guilty, of course. I made sure of that. I'd casually drop little hints, like, oh, he always had a temper, you know, or he was so good at hiding things. I just kept reinforcing the narrative I'd created. I even posted some stuff on Facebook about healing and finding strength in adversity. All while secretly laughing my ass off. Public persona, private thoughts, total contrast. Life was simpler. I didn't have to worry about anyone checking up on me, no one questioning my whereabouts. I could spend my money how I wanted, when I wanted. No more shared expenses, no more him expecting me to contribute equally to things. I kept my money separate, like always, and now I didn't have to pretend to be interested in his financial goals. It was pretty sweet, actually. Then, about 1.5 years into his sentence, I got a call. From the cops. Again. My stomach did a weird flip. Not fear, just annoyance. Like, what now? Had Ben done something stupid in jail? They asked me to come down to the station. And when I got there, they had this guy. Not Ben. Some scrawny, nervous-looking dude, probably in his late 20s. And the cops, they looked grim. They told me they'd just caught this guy, name of Dennis, on a completely different robbery charge. And when they were questioning him, he started bragging. Bragging about all the other stuff he'd gotten away with. And one of the things he bragged about? The old lady's jewelry box. He even described the house, the neighborhood, everything. He said he'd seen a guy in a car, pulled over nearby, just sitting there. And he thought, perfect, a patsy. So he tossed the empty jewelry box into Ben's open car window after the robbery, figuring if anyone saw him, they'd blame the guy in the car. He even said he wrote the note and tossed it in too, just to make it look like a confession. He was just trying to divert attention. And it worked. It actually worked. He'd seen Ben just sitting there, probably zoned out, and seized the opportunity. What a lucky break for him, huh? My world just froze. And then it started spinning, really fast. It was like a slow-motion car crash in my head. He was innocent. Ben. My ex-husband. The guy I let rot in jail. He was innocent. I could feel my face getting hot. My hands were shaking. Not from guilt, though. From panic. Pure, unadulterated panic. What was I going to do? How was I going to explain this? How was I going to admit that I had stood there, in court, under oath, and basically let an innocent man go to prison because I was too selfish, too lazy, me, to admit I had lied? Because I didn't want to admit I was wrong? The police were talking, but I wasn't really hearing them. All I could hear was the echo of my own words in court. He was distant, he was irritable, he was forgetful. All that crap I'd spewed. And now it was coming back to bite me in the butt. I remember thinking, okay, Jess. Think. Think fast. How do you spin this? My mind was racing. I could try to say I was just confused, that I was grieving. But no, that wouldn't work. Too many details. Too much public drama. I tried to keep my face neutral, but I could feel it twitching. The police looked at me like they were waiting for me to react. And I just couldn't. My mouth felt dry. They told me they were going to release Ben. And they were going to apologize to him. A big, formal apology. And he would probably sue the state. And they would make sure he was compensated. My stomach turned. Compensated. Meaning he'd be rich. And free. And he'd know. He'd know what I did. He'd know I knew he was innocent, and I let him sit there. I went home in a daze. My apartment felt small, suddenly. Like the walls were closing in. I tried to call my friends, but my voice just wouldn't work. I felt this intense urge to just disappear. To move. To change my name. When Ben got out, I saw him on the news. He looked different. Older, thinner. But there was this light in his eyes again. Like he was finally free. He stood there, surrounded by reporters, and he just kept saying, "I just want to go home. I just want to move on." He didn't mention me. Not once. And that actually stung more than I thought it would. Like I was just a footnote in his nightmare. I knew he'd come for me. Not physically, but he'd tell people. He'd tell everyone. And I knew, deep down, that when he found out the full extent of my testimony, he'd be furious. He'd realize I wasn't just confused, I was actively working against him. And he did. He got in touch with his lawyer. And his lawyer got in touch with mine. Oh, yeah, I had a lawyer too now. For the divorce. Which, of course, was now going to be incredibly messy. He was asking for everything. Alimony, half the apartment, even my car, which I'd bought with my own money. He was citing emotional distress, financial hardship, reputational damage. He was saying I was a toxic, manipulative person who actively contributed to his unjust incarceration. Which, between us, I wanted to scream, you know what? I didn't make him run. He did that all on his own. But I couldn't say that. Not anymore. His lawyer sent over copies of my testimony. My own words. And reading them back, I could see how truly awful I'd been. Not that I felt bad, necessarily, but more like, wow, I really stuck my neck out there for this. I mean, it was brilliant, in a sick way. But now it was blowing up in my face. My friends started to distance themselves. Slowly at first. A missed call here, a vague excuse there. Then it was outright. I saw pictures of them on Facebook, hanging out, and I wasn't in them. I knew what was happening. Ben had told them. Or, more likely, he didn't have to. The truth, in this case, was pretty clear. His innocence was so public, so undeniable. And my role in it, well, it wasn't hard to connect the dots. I was the crazy ex-wife who let him rot in jail. The bitter, spiteful ex-wife. They probably started calling me a bitch in their heads, just like I did to Sarah. My job also started getting weird. My boss, who was already a pain, suddenly became even more of one. I heard whispers, saw people looking at me in the break room. It started with little things, like being passed over for a project I was perfect for. Then, a few weeks later, I got called into HR. They didn't say it outright, but it was clear. My reputation was causing problems. Internal discord, they called it. Basically, they were telling me I was toxic and they wanted me gone. I tried to argue, to say it was unfair, that my personal life shouldn't affect my professional life. But they just looked at me with those blank, professional stares. I was let go. Not fired, exactly, but restructured. They gave me a severance package, probably to avoid a lawsuit. But it was clear. I was blacklisted. My career, effectively, was over. Who wants to hire someone who let their innocent husband rot in jail? So now, here I am. Unemployed. Alone. My friends are gone. My family still talks to me, but there's this unspoken judgment in their eyes. Ben is living his best life. He got a huge settlement from the state. He moved to a new city, Phoenix, I think. Got a new job, a fancy apartment. He even got a new girlfriend, I saw on Facebook. She's like, a genuinely nice person. And they look happy. Like, genuinely, annoyingly happy. And me? I'm stuck here in Dallas, in this apartment I can barely afford anymore, scrolling through my phone, seeing everyone else move on. I guess you could say I got what I deserved. I achieved my selfish goals, alright. I got rid of Ben. I got my freedom. And now I'm just, alone. Completely and utterly alone. And it sucks. Do I regret what I did? Do I regret lying? No. Not really. I regret how it all turned out. I regret that I got caught. I regret that Ben was innocent, because that really screwed things up. If he'd actually been guilty, none of this would have happened. I'd be the long-suffering wife, and he'd be the criminal, and I'd still have my friends and my job. It's not fair, really. I just wanted a little bit of control, a little bit of drama. And now look at me. It's everyone else's fault, really. If Ben hadn't run, if that random guy hadn't tossed the box in his car, if the police hadn't caught Dennis, none of this would have happened. But of course, no one sees it that way. They just see me as the villain. And I don't care anymore. I really don't. They can all think what they want. It's fine. I'm fine.